Welcome to Quilting on the Side, the podcast where we uncover the secrets to turning your passion for quilting into a profitable side hustle.
I'm Tori from the Quilt Patch by Tori.
And I'm Andi from True Blue Quilts. And together, we're your co-hosts on this exciting journey of creativity, entrepreneurship, and all things quilting.
We're here to help you navigate the world of quilt pattern design, course creation, digital marketing, and running an online quilt business. We've been through the ups and downs ourselves, so we know what it takes to make money from your favorite hobby.
That's right, Tori. We're going to share our experiences on how we've grown our businesses while balancing family with other paying work responsibilities. It's not always easy, but it's definitely possible. Welcome to another episode of Quilting on the Side. We are diving into all things guild presentations today, but first I want to thank our sponsor, EQ8. EQ8 is terrific design software for quilters, and we'll share a little bit more about that later. But we first want to dive into our primary topic. But before we even get into that, Tori, there's probably some quilters that have never been to a guild meeting. So you want to start with a basic definition for us?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand what a quilt guild is before we kind of dive into working with them. So quilt guilds are essentially charitable organizations. So they're nonprofits. They aren't in it for a business, even though we are coming to them as a business. And I think that it's really important to keep in mind that they are there for a presentation, to learn something, to socialize, and to have fun. And their guild essentially, again, is a nonprofit. It's just a social club where they do good work.
Yeah. And most of the quilt guilds I've been a part of have some kind of vision or mission statement around continuing the art of quilting. So, like you said, they just want to get together and talk about quilting. There's usually a business portion of the meeting. They have to go over minutes and budget and all that kind of stuff to maintain their status as a group. And a lot of the evening is spent on show and tell. Everybody loves to share and talk about what they've been doing. And they'll reach out to other quilt designers, other teachers to provide some type of program for the evening or the daytime. They can meet at any day or time. So how did you get started with teaching and presenting to guilds?
I became a certified teacher with Shannon Brinkley's Color Confidence course. And so I got a few referrals from there, but I got more referrals from having a designated page on my website with the title saying Quilt Guild Workshops. And I had three main ones. I straightened one out every once in a while. My main ones were the Color Confidence from Shannon Brinkley, Movement and Quilting, and a trunk show, just about my journey. And I got the most requests for that Movement and Quilting presentation, that program. And so I got started having that listed. So I got a lot of people coming in through just that form of, I put a simple form on there, like, if you're interested, please fill this out with name, the guild name, and then contact. Kept it really simple. And then I reached out via email to answer them back. I also did cold emails. And so I cold emailed about 40 on guilds. And I also shared on social media. And I got a few no's, mostly ghosted. But I did get 3 or 4 yeses, and a couple of them came at the last minute. So 2 of them, I remember the first year I had it up, 2 of them came within like a month of the presentation date because their original teacher had canceled. So they're like, hey, I see you do virtual presentations. Would you be available in a month? Which is basically like their next meeting, 2% for the guild. And I was like, oh, yes, I can do that. We can do that. So let's get this contract signed and let's get this moving. And so that's how I got started. So, Andi, you presented to quilt guilds, and how did you get started?
Yeah, I actually started because I was a member of a guild with my mom here in the Phoenix area, and Arizona has a state guild, and then there's dozens of individual chapters, so you can find someplace local. And being part of the guild as a member first let me see some of those inside routes. The state guild maintains a teacher file, and they have an education chair, so they're helping find presentations for all the individual chapters. So I knew that resource was available when my mom and I wrote our first book. And then I used that content as the trunk show content for it. And then, yeah, like you said, I put it on my website, and people will reach out anytime I'm a part of other things. If I go to a show, like we were just at QuiltCon, and I had somebody reach out to me afterwards and said, "Hey, I saw you at QuiltCon. Do you ever do presentations?" And so showing up and being out there, participating in online summits will generate interest, and people will just reach out as kind of a side question. "Hey, could you do a program for my guild?"
That reminds me, when you said that your mom and you joined a quilt guild, my mom was actually the president of a quilt guild. And when they needed a filler, again, like the last minute, like, "Hey, can you do this?" She had me book in with her quilt guild. And then because I was in Arizona at the time, so I was driving to California to present to a Bakersfield guild. So I reached out to all the guilds in the area, and I made it a whole long trip to take my son, and we went to visit grandma, and we went and presented at, I think it was 3 guilds at that time. So I went to Bakersfield and then Victorville and I think it was Apple Valley. But yeah, right in the area, because I grew up in Lancaster, so I knew the little towns out there had quilt guilds. So I knew to reach out to all those little towns to be like, "Hey, I'm going to be in town. Would you like a discount on a presentation, or can I come in and present a workshop for you?" And so that was another great way to kind of spread awareness of what I offer. And then from there, another guild heard from me. So it's really helpful, especially when you're there in person, to let the guild members there know that you are looking for more guilds. And usually they're part of more than one guild, and they can kind of get you in their guild. So it's always great to share wherever you are that you do presentations.
Yeah. And so you brought up some good points about virtual presentations versus in person. So definitely, if you're traveling somewhere, make as many contacts as you can. Sometimes you can even do that kind of trunk show, or if you have a workshop, you could do that at a shop as well as a guild. So don't limit yourself to one or the other. But this is probably a good time that we could describe those two different variations of workshops that you've talked about: a trunk show versus a lecture on a technique or one specific topic. So what's the difference there?
So the difference, let's see, a trunk show is basically what it sounds like. You have a trunk full of quilts that you're pulling quilts out and you're displaying, you're showing, you're talking about them. And you can do this in a very relaxed way. And you might suggest also is that you have a theme, you have a lesson learned from the group of quilts that you bring. That way you're giving inspiration, but you're also giving lessons learned, tips and tricks, something that brings an educational component with your trunk show. And there was and I wish I could remember who presented it, but I watched a virtual presentation. I always forget names, but they did amazing. It was a duo of quilters, and they had a business together. I believe they were sisters. They could have been mom and daughter, but they did an amazing trunk show about the mistakes that they made and how to fix them. So like one got expo marker on a quilt, and she shared how she fixed that particular quilt, or Sharpie on a quilt and how she fixed that, and the wrong quilting or something like that and how she fixed that. And it was hilarious. And we got to see some beautiful quilts, and we had some great tips and tricks to take away from that guild presentation. So having a lesson with the trunk show, I think, is really important. Was anything you want to add to that, Andi?
Yeah, I want to share that don't let this idea of a theme hold you back. Quilters, however prolific you are, if you've been quilting for more than a minute, you probably have some things that you could put together for a trunk show. Half dozen quilts could tell a good story. And I marketed my first trunk show as Journey of a 21st Century Quilter. And, that's a broad title, but it just allowed me to share how I got started, what I was interested in. So don't think you have to have some, the history of half square triangles, and go way back to the Middle Ages or something.
I love that you brought out how many quilts, because I get that question often, and 6 can work. Like you can make a good trunk show out of 6 quilts. suggest 9 if you want to go a little more detailed, but you don't need like 40 quilts for a trunk show. You can stick with less than 10 and have a really good show. And one guild actually I did in person. Actually, this was my movement quilting. They had taken volunteers, just stood up and started taking the quilts. Every time I had an example, they would take the quilts and they would parade them. So I had this parade of quilts going around the room while I was talking. It was the coolest thing. And could you imagine if there were 40 quilts to show? Like the poor guild, nobody would have been sitting at that guild because it wasn't super huge.
Right? Yeah. And there's usually the 2 tall ladies that have to hold everything. So that's great. I do appreciate when guilds have a good number of volunteer quilt handlers, because like you said, it's nice for those ladies in the back to be able to see the quilts up close too. So that is a great segue into the idea of virtual lectures. What's your format or strategy when you are doing a virtual presentation versus in person?
Mine are really similar, but what I do is when I make a presentation, because I do so many virtual, or did so many virtual, because I kind of stepped a little bit away from that. I designed my slides, my examples with all my in-person quilts so that it was streamlined. So I could take my notes, my script, my examples, they're all in the same order in a slideshow or in person. So it was really easy for me to remember. It was really easy for me to tell stories in order without like mixing myself up, because I get really nervous in front of a crowd, whether it's virtual or in person, and my mind goes blank. Even when I'm doing my own webinars and stuff, my mind can go blank when I get nervous. So I make sure that my quilts are, and my shows, all my programs really are all in the same order, both virtually and in person. Do you have anything that you do differently?
No, I was just wanting to recommend that people do make a slideshow, because it gets really awkward trying to hold up a quilt to the camera, and you think you want to show off some detail, but go ahead and take the pictures and throw everything into a presentation. You know, you can log into Google and use Google Slides for free. So it really helps to streamline things, make sure you're, like you said, you're covering the same content in the same order. And once you have the slideshow done, once you have the script, then you don't have to worry about when or if you get a booking, because sure, you can pull it out of your back pocket and get it scheduled.
I like that you mentioned Google Slides, because it's really great to have this presentation available wherever you are. Just in case your computer breaks, your internet's not working, you want to make sure you have a hard copy ready to go. So like on a stick, I call it a stick, the USB.
Yeah.
Do we still call them sticks?
It changes, but
exactly. So you want to have a hard copy version, even if it's virtual. So you want to have it able to present even without internet. And if you have it a virtual or an internet version, then you can pull it up on your computer. You can pull it up at someone else's computer if your computer just doesn't work. So that's another thing to keep in mind. I also want to give the advice when it comes to slides. I have seen some really interesting slides. They are very colorful. They are very unique and artistic, but then you slap a quilt on there and all you see is noise. Like it's just too much. So when you create your slides for your quilts, keep in mind, you want the slides to fade in the background and the quilt to really pop forward and be the thing they're looking at. Nobody cares about the slides themselves. They care about the quilts. So we want to make the quilts shine. So keeping a background light colored or neutral even would be a really great way to go, but you can keep it simple. And you could just have a white slide with your name. I would put your name on every single slide, because there are so many presentations where I'm like, I love what they're talking about. At first, I didn't think I liked this presentation. I wasn't sure if I was really going to be into this. But as the presenter was presenting, I'm like, who is this? I need to follow them on Instagram. I need to sign up for their newsletter. I need to buy their book. So have your name on every slide, even if it's small in the corner. And so they get to see the quilt and they see your name. And that's basically all you need for a slide. You don't need a bunch of words, and maybe a few words to help you remember what it's supposed to be about, or the name of your patterns would be a great thing to put on a slide, but keep them simple.
Yeah, that's great visual design reminders there.
Oh, and Andi, we were talking about trunk show versus teaching a technique, and we didn't quite get to teaching a technique. So what would you say the difference would be? Because we talked about trunk show. So what about teaching a technique? What advice would you give for that?
If you have a signature technique or style or something that you do, then yeah, go ahead and build your presentation around that. And I would think that content would just kind of build itself, because you can show the small individual component, and then you can show that technique in several quilts, and you can pique people's curiosity there. I think the biggest hesitation for a lot of people in terms of doing lectures about their techniques is you don't want to give away all of your workshop content in the lecture, because you want people then to buy into the workshop portion, whether it's a workshop in conjunction with your guild presentation or funneling them to an online class or some future event. But definitely think about how you can kind of tell the history of where you found that idea, what inspired you. That kind of builds out that whole, where did this technique come from, without giving away all your content secrets that you want to keep in the workshop.
I think that's great advice. Absolutely great advice.
So I have seen a lot of questions online from people that are new to presenting at guilds, and they're wondering about prices. So what has been your experience with deciding how much to charge?
So I did a lot of research on this for my book, Workshops Unleashed. And in it, there's actually like a program outline and stuff. And then we go into pricing. The lowest I would suggest for a teacher is $300 for a hour-long program. So 45 minutes to hour long. Some guilds don't like a full hour. Some want to make sure there's 15 minutes for question and answer, because they have teachers that build all the way up or talk all the way up to the 45-minute mark. Pricing, I would start at $300 at least, and then raise your prices every year. If you're lucky enough to have a program where everyone wants it, raise your price. Raise your price, especially if you're feeling burnt out, especially if you're feeling like, oh, another guild wants this? I don't know if I have the energy for this. Raise your price.
Yeah. Susan Smith had a great comment on pricing that's really a good reminder. The guild is not paying only for that 1 hour of time. They are paying for all of your years of experience, and we're worth it. So go ahead. And even if you're just starting out, do not feel that you have to discount or do things for free just for the experience. No, you are a qualified quilting instructor, and you can charge the same as other people.
I will say there are, with pricing, I would have a $300 standard rate. Now, if you get pushback from a small guild, you can always do a per person type of thing. You can kind of get a little creative with your pricing and try to figure out a price that works for both of you, but don't shortchange yourself. You still want to try to charge for your time. And like Andi said, your years and years of experience. If you need ideas, you can always reach out to us in our Patreon. You can join and ask us anything you like, especially during our question and answer sessions. We do live question and answer every month for our BFF side hustlers. I love the name. It always makes me smile. But we do that. You can also reach out to your community and see what people are charging, what guilds are offering, and see in your area if there's any difference.
Yeah, there are some regional differences, I'm sure. But yeah, just ask around the quilt instructor community. I would say the majority of us are very willing to share our experiences and some of those nitty-gritty details. So definitely get in touch. One other aspect of guild presentations that I wanted to touch on, and it fits kind of with the pricing, is the contract requirement. I would definitely recommend, whenever you are doing a program for a group, to have a contract. And it doesn't have to be, 8 pages of legal jargon. Just basically put in writing when and where, how much it's going to cost, and some cancellation guarantee. So I've done very simple things where I specify the time and date of the program. If it's a Zoom call, I put in writing that I will join 15 minutes ahead. I require a deposit up front with the balance due at the day of the event. So that handles that. And you could put, minor details about if you need a check made out to whoever, or PayPal, is it fine, or, whatever details you want to put in there. And then for my cancellation policy, I just have some general language about we will try to reschedule if either party has a conflict, and if you cannot find an acceptable date within, and you set a time frame for how long you would like to postpone, then I'll refund. And I keep $25 for my time and effort of putting the program together. You can honestly put whatever you want, and people have the choice of whether they accept it or not. So definitely get things in writing and keep track of things. You might want to put a clause in there about promotion. I say something about they can't use my image for promoting anything other than my lecture. So kind of cover your behind, as they say, on some of these things.
Definitely. And if they push to use their own contract, read it carefully and negotiate. So if there's something that you feel uncomfortable with, you can negotiate.
One good thing that I heard some discussion about recently was making sure you're allowed to sell at the guild meetings, because a lot of teachers, especially if we are lecturing about our own patterns or books, you want to be able to sell the books, and some groups meet at places that do not allow outside sales. I have run into that myself, where, they said, we're meeting in this town hall and they don't allow sales on the premises. So you would either have to direct people to your website or meet them out in the parking lot. So there's ways around it, but
let me show you what's in my trunk.
Exactly. Yeah. That puts a whole new meaning on Trunk Show.
Before, because a part of the reason why we want to do guilds is not just to get paid, but also to be able to share our other things. Then that helps make up the cost of the travel and the time. It's not only the funds that you get paid from the guild, but also from your sales. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it's not all the time, but there are places out there. So like you said, read the contract carefully, ask all the questions about what's expected and allowed, and hopefully people will start having great fun with presenting. I love teaching and talking about quilting, so I'm happy to do a presentation for any group. Just give me a call.
So when you said expectations, it made me think of something and an advice I want to give. I've had several people reach out to me to ask about creating a program. Like, how do I do this without selling? Because so many of us want to get up there and sell our patterns because we are a business. However, we're presenting, as we shared, to a social group and a nonprofit. So they're not looking to be sold to, but there's a way that you can gently sell and get them interested in what you do offer. And that is to use your quilts as examples for your teaching points. Like I said, if you're using slides, you can have the name of the quilt up there. You can talk about your inspiration, how you designed it. You also, at the end of your quilt lecture or trunk show, whatever you're giving, whether it's a teaching technique, or you can share that you have patterns for sale and where to get them. So if you run into what Andi was talking about, where you can't sell on the premise, you can say it's on my website and hand out your card to every single person that will take one. They love the physical reminder of you. And then if you are able to have a table there, have your patterns out, display them, and stand by your table and say, these are for sale, come and buy them. And just proudly share what you have. But during your lecture, you want to make sure that you are teaching, you are inspiring, you're giving tips, you're not selling. So we do want to be careful of that, because there seems to be a trend of quilters, businesses who are out there presenting to sell. And that should be second to teaching, because that's what guilds want. That's what they need. That's what they're there for. And if you're not meeting their needs, you're not meeting your ideal customer's needs. That ideal customer is not going to buy from you if you're not meeting their needs. So we do want to make sure that we are meeting those needs and then selling second.
Yeah. When you're doing a virtual presentation, I think it's a little bit easier to slide in that, oh, and here's a coupon code for my website, and it makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, I really like what you're saying about leading with the education. We're here to educate, entertain, inspire these quilters. And if you go in with that friendly attitude, I think it will it will go a long way.
Especially if you can get them to interact with each other. So if there's this part of your program where you can have them turn and talk about something or raise their hand and look around and kind of like giggle at each other, they love that. It's an interactive activity. So you don't have to stand up there and just lecture, right? You can have them participate. You can have them ask questions. You can have them discuss. Just know how to bring them back. Because they won't just keep talking. So you want to give them a time limit. You want to like raise your hand when you're ready. You want to like get their attention and bring them back. But having an interactive component in your trunk show or your program is great.
Yeah. So there may be people that are wondering, oh my gosh, how would I do that if I'm just showing off these different quilts that I've made? You could, if you're getting ready to show a specific quilt, maybe that's all in purple, you would break and say, okay, how many people's favorite color is purple? Raise your hand. That's a quick way to get engagement, and they're going to be excited about what comes next. So definitely build in some kind of engagement. If you can build an activity. I did some free motion lectures where I just printed some 9-patch quilt blocks and gave handouts, and we sketched together on that diagram. So if you can make your presentation interactive, I think that would really boost you and get those word of mouth references, because as you said before, people are members of multiple guilds, and quilters we have so many different connections that someone will say, oh, hey, I saw Andi, I saw Tori, and then it will spark someone else's curiosity and you may get another booking from it. Anything else about guild presentations?
I have more in my book. So if you're really curious,
yeah, definitely.
That's why I wrote the book. Like, I have it all written out. So, I mean, really, if you really want to do this, if this is something you want to commit to and turn into a business, I have an outline in my book. Like, literally, it'll walk you through step by step how to build your own program. And if you're stuck, you can join our Patreon. If you want one-on-one help, I offer strategy sessions. But getting practice is essential. Do not give it away for free. I will say, like we talked about, honoring your time. And if you are brand new, completely brand new, you have never done a presentation at all in your entire life since high school, you can offer a discount to maybe a group of friends or a quilt guild and offer them a 50% off because you are brand new. This is right out the gate. You're not sure how it's going to go, but get some feedback in exchange. So not only are they paying you half price, but they're also able to give you feedback as part of your contract that they are going to write out feedback for you so that you can improve that workshop and then charge full price the next time you give it.
Yeah, that's great. And the book Tori keeps referring to is Workshops Unleashed, the sponsor for today's episode, her guidebook for quilt and craft teachers. And I have read the book. It has fantastic information, even for some of us who have done this once or twice before. She lays out a great plan for developing your workshop and marketing it and gathering that feedback. So well done, Tori. Where can we find your book?
Thank you, Andi. You can find it at thequiltpatchbytori.com/workshops unleashed or at Amazon, on Barnes & Noble. And I also sell through Ingram Spark. So if you want to buy wholesale, you can buy that through Ingram Spark.
That's awesome. I promised I would tell you more about EQ8. This software is wonderful for quilters of all levels. If you are a beginner, you can get fabulous ideas from their block library. If you're more advanced and ready to design your own patterns, you can create brand new blocks with this software, and you can actually import fabric swatches and see how your designs will look with the actual fabric you want to use. So if you haven't already, go ahead, use our link, download EQ8 and get started in the exciting world of quilt design. Well, I hope we have given people a lot to think about as they plan and host guild presentations. So have fun out there and do a little quilting on the side. What a great discussion. If you enjoyed this episode of Quilting on the Side, please leave us a review on whichever platform you're listening. It can be iTunes, Spotify, or even our YouTube channel.
And hit the subscribe button so you don't miss our next chat. Until then, remember to have fun in your business and do a little quilting on the side.